Hey, I'm Peter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. Welcome to Essential Issues Weekly, where I talk about DC Comics recently released on the Ultra tier of the DC Universe subscription service, 1 month after their original print publishing date. In each installment, I pick an assortment of comics to talk about as a DC fan and also explore what, if anything, they have to say about the essential issues of real life. Now, warning, full spoilers for everything that I talk about, so be aware this is your first and only warning that many spoilers lie ahead. Right now, we're taking a look at comics originally published on January 31st, 2023. From that group, I have chosen Lazarus Planet Legends Reborn, #1, and The Flash 1 Minute War Special, #1. So, starting with the Lazarus Planet Legends Reborn, this is continuing the series of one-shots that are kind of coming between the first and last major installments of the Lazarus Planet crossover, which I believe is Lazarus Planet Alpha, and then Lazarus Planet Omega is going to wrap things up. And in each of these, it's kind of like an anthology collection of short stories by different creative teams that are focusing, or highlighting, maybe I should say, heroes, characters that are going to, I guess, be given further attention in the upcoming Dawn of DC event. I think that's kind of the implication here, but I'm not sure about that. And in this one, we've got Raven being featured, of course, famous member of the Teen Titans, dealing with a conflict with her demonic father, Trigon. We've got Nightwing having an encounter with a character named City Boy, who on the cover you see kind of an idea of what his costume might look like, but he's not really wearing a costume in the story he's featured in. Firestorm, which is always a character that I want to work and I want to like. And then Renee Montoya, who right now is the commissioner of the Gotham City Police Department, but it looks like she will be returning to her role as the Question. So getting into these stories a little bit here. First, we've got Masks and Monsters, the story about Renee Montoya, and I felt like this story didn't do much more than remind us that she was the Question at one point. I believe she became the Question in the Weekly 52 series from the mid-2000s, whenever that was. And I read that. I really enjoyed that weekly series. And I remember her becoming the Question. And I think it was fairly motivated. I think there was something going on in her life at the time that kind of made something of the origin story for her and why becoming the Question was important to her. But I can't remember for the life of me what it was now. And in this opening scene, she's got these two detectives coming in and telling her kind of about this case they're working on, and she really is getting on them, getting angry about why they're basically not on top of this more, on top of this in a harder and more fierce way. And not knowing initially who or what the story was going to be about, she felt a little bit like the antagonist. I was like, dang, she is really getting on these cops. And so I don't know if we're supposed to feel the same with her, or if we're supposed to feel like this is just a bit of a character flaw that's showing up in her day-to-day work, and that's why she needs to become the Question to kind of work this out of her system, or what. But she kind of goes home, resolves to realizes first off that there's stuff that the police can't handle, stuff that Batman can't handle, like Commissioner Gordon would have just turned on the light and summoned Batman, but that's not really an option for him now. And so she needs to take matters into her own hands and recognizes, okay, it's time to become the Question again. But I feel like this reintroduction of her as the Question is lacking the reintroduction of her motives. And so I'm really hoping that wherever they go with Renee Montoya as the Question, I'm on board for her being the Question again, but I need a reintroduction of why it's important to her, what drives her to do what she's doing as the Question. Because otherwise, she's leaping across buildings and stuff, and I'm thinking to myself, in addition to her motivation, I need to remember, does she have any kind of specialized training? Does she have any kind of very mild metahuman ability? What is she other than literally just a really committed police officer covering her face. So what makes her someone that's really going to be more capable? Is it just that she's more driven? So I guess there's things about her capabilities and her motivations that are missing here. And I feel like those are kind of like the two major ingredients for every superhero story. So I think it's really important that, to me anyway, that they get into those things more in whatever fuller, more proper introduction they give the character in the future. Then we've got a story featuring Gar Logan, or who appears to be Gar Logan, but we find out is actually not later on, and Raven. They're just in the thick of some stuff. I don't even know what's going on. Some of these stories feel like I was dropped into the middle of without a context of what's going on, but evidently there are some demon kids that are holed up in a church. I'm not sure what a demon kid is, and I have to refresh my memory on the concept of demons. Are demons not ageless creatures? Are they... it looks like in this story, demons can be children. That demons can procreate, maybe with humans. I don't know. But there's stuff I'm missing about the lore of what the definition of a demon is in the DC universe that I've certainly forgotten. So anyway, there's these demons holed up in a church, and Raven and Beast Boy are there, and Raven, kind of takes it upon herself to go in and resolve the situation. And these demons are kind of like, I don't know, messing with this priest or something, and they're trying to not be demons. I'm not sure I can't remember exactly what's going on. It's been a day or two since I read this. I should probably record these fresh after reading them. I did review it really quickly, but anyway, she goes in, takes it upon herself to try and help these demons out. They don't want to live the way they're living anymore, and I feel like maybe they became demons because of the rains or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, I'm not going to go back right now. One of the reasons I'm able to experiment with doing this series right now is based on the assumption that I'm not going to edit these videos. So shame on me for not having this more fresh in my mind, but I'm not gonna pause now and figure out more deeply what's going on. Really, what I think interested me more in this story, because I'm not terribly interested in Raven as a character, but when you're dealing with the supernatural, you are going to tend to have stories that delve into philosophical issues more, moral issues more, spiritual issues more, and that's certainly the case with Raven. She comes in and saves this priest who says, "Oh, thank God," after he is dropped out of whatever weird situation the demons had him held in, and she, in passing, just says, "Hardly, Father," because, of course, she has more of these demonic origins, but and I think that was more probably just a thoughtless little jokey thing, pointing out the irony of her attachment to demons and stuff like that. But actually, from a Christian theological perspective, God ultimately is sovereign over all things. If we look at the book of Job, even the activity of demons is subject to the permission of God. And so he is either allowing or directly causing things to happen. Of course, when you're talking about God, who exists outside of or before time causally, then we have to, call into question, okay, how do we even talk about his relationship to cause and effect and things like that? So, you could go off on a rabbit trail there. But in any case, I think it's very appropriate that the priest thank God. And even though Raven says, "Hardly, Father," well, she owes her very existence to God. She owes the fact that she was in the right place at the right time to address this situation. She owes that to God. There's all these things that should rightly be attributed to God. And so there's, in all good things that happen, we have cause to thank God. But anyway, this is not an attempt on the author to make some kind of a philosophical statement. I think it's just a point worth commenting on. Let's see. Oh, something else is that these demons, they really are not happy with the state that they're in. They want to be made good or returned to humans, whatever the case may be. But they were hoping that this priest could help them. And now, when this situation is resolved, the priest is running out of the church, and one of the demons says to Raven, "You can't let him leave, not until we're right with the Lord." And she says, "Trust me, you have bigger problems." And I think this speaks possibly to a view of God as being kind of irrelevant and distant and removed from our immediate circumstances. Now, I think that maybe we could have a discussion and some back and forth about this if she would have said, trust me, you have more immediate problems or you have more pressing issues. I mean, maybe we could have a conversation there. Even so, I would still, maybe not be on board with that statement. But certainly the biggest problem is not being right with the Lord. If the Lord, if by the Lord we're talking about Jesus, if the Lord we are talking about Yahweh, the God of the Bible, then the greatest concern is being in right relationship with Him. I mean, that has eternal ramifications, but it also has immediate ramifications in terms of how we view the problems that we are facing. If we are not seeking to be kind of in right relationship with God, then we're not going to be making decisions regarding our immediate problems starting from the right place. So anyway, that was just, one more little brief beat that I thought was worth commenting on. What else here? I don't know that there's much more that I'd want to comment on. But it looks like Trigon is going to be relevant to the development of a new character here named Trilogy, that is really kind of at one point questioning. Let's see, what did it say here? We're staying here in God's. Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, there's a couple of these demons that want to go off, that want to get help. But one of them stays behind. This is the one that Trigon in a moment refers to as Trilogy, names him Trilogy. I don't really know why. Maybe in some way, a reflection, some reference vaguely to the word Trinity. I don't know. But he says, we're staying here in God's house. He let us get broke, so He needs to fix us. And so that's just kind of an interesting point, that he is really blaming God for allowing this to happen to them. And so, expecting God, feeling entitled to God coming in and fixing the situation. And so, I don't know that I have much more to say there, but that's probably something that I would want to explore if they get into this character more and exactly what happened to him and his origins. Again, I have to apologize because I should have looked more closely at this little short story. But then again, maybe the information isn't there. One thing that's been the case in a number of these little short stories is I feel like I'm out of the loop. I don't know what's going on. So, but anyway, we'll kind of see what happens. This Trigon at the end approaches this demon boy and sees some potential in him, specifically because of just kind of his perspective on things right now. He walks up to this demon boy who's saying, presumably to God, I did everything right, everything, and you still let this happen to me. And we can certainly relate to that. We kind of assume that something's wrong if we are doing, as far as we can tell, the right things, but horrible things are still happening to us. Of course, we can look at the book of Job to realize that there's really not necessarily a relationship between doing the right things or the wrong things and what kinds of negative or positive circumstances we experience in life. And then Trigon comes up to him and says, why don't you listen to my offer? It's a good one, I think. I'm your father, Liam, or should I say Trilogy, he calls him. I've been listening to you, and I think you're very special. Do you know why? It's because you don't trust anybody. Not me, not Raven, not even your own brothers. That's a terrific start. You see, not only can a good demon not be trusted, a good demon can't trust either. And so clearly, it seems like they're going to be dealing with this issue of trust, and that being something that is a virtue. We ought to be able to trust other people, but this character is not able to do that. So, we'll see what happens with the character Trilogy coming up in Dawn of DC, if they do anything interesting with him. Then they've got this character City Boy that I'm not really interested in conceptually or based on this story, which seems to involve him coming to visit Gotham. And I guess he has powers to interface with the city in some way, like touch it and then see almost mystical blueprints of it and to find things in it, to become aware of its history or by aware of the history of objects that he touches and stuff. And he ends up having an encounter eventually with Nightwing. Again, I just feel like this, I commented on this last time, this way of doing these short stories to try and give me tastes of characters. I guess maybe they're not focusing on the right aspects of a taste of a character to really get me pulled in. His power set is a little bit interesting. During this encounter, he ends up in the sewers and he, is feeling, I guess, pulled or led to this part of the city specifically. And in the sewer water comes across this tiara that he grabs onto, and electricity flares up, and he gets a vision of this tiara and what it's experienced in the past. And we see a woman wearing the tiara, wearing fancy clothing outside, and then it blows off of her. And so she seems to have lost it. Then we see her tearfully talking to police officers. There's no dialogue in this. That's no thought balloons or dialogue balloons. We're just supposed to infer from the visuals that we're seeing what's going on. She's tearfully talking to the police about this, I assume, about losing the tiara. But then the next frame is, I think, her in a prison cell. And I have no idea what's going on. And then they show an old woman in the next one, which we infer from what happens next is this woman. So for some reason, she lost the tiara. She told the police about it, which somehow ended up getting her put in prison. And then many years later, she's an old, sad woman. And then a scene or so later, this city boy delivers the tiara to this old woman, and he says, "Here, I think this is yours." And she's like, "What?" And he says, "Go ahead and take it." And she's like, "Oh my goodness!" And she, had lost this thing for so long, and she's living in poverty and stuff. And so I don't know if this has sentimental value or if the idea we're supposed to pick up from this is that it will be a financial benefit to her. I don't know. It's totally unclear, and I just don't know that I'm curious enough. I'm just more confused. This doesn't make me want to read more about City Boy, in part because I'm not really interested in his power set, but I do have to say that given the concept of his power, there's a lot of potential here for some really emotional stories to be told. How often is this kind of power going to be really effective in a combat situation? So it seems to me that City Boy's adventures, which will continue later this year, they say, could very well be on this more personal level. And I am interested in that kind of storytelling. I tend to want to have my cake and eat it too, so have crazy, bombastic, action-y powers and spectacle, and then also have stories with real heart to them. But I might be willing to take a break and sacrifice some spectacular power stuff for some stories with some heart to them. So, we'll see if the next appearance of City Boy, wherever that might be, actually pulls me in. Then we've got this story with Firestorm, and briefly, Ronnie Raymond, who is one half of Firestorm, the other half being Professor Stein. This is a classic character from, I think he was created in the 80s, but I'm not sure. But in recent years, starting 10 years or more ago, they've really tried to reboot this character and do some different things with him. Professor Stein was taken out of the picture for a while, and then they brought in a young black high schooler who was really like a genius in physics and stuff, and so he eventually came to replace, was it the professor? Or I can't remember I think he was bonded with Ronnie Raymond. I think they de-aged Ronnie and put him back in high school, so they were kind of high school rivals. Ronnie was the jock, and the other kid, I can't remember his name, was the science whiz or whatever, and then you put them together, and so you've got the science whiz able to help or create things, because Firestorm conceptually can rearrange matter and can take any inanimate object and rearrange the matter to other things, like create phosphorus or oxygen or, any element in a raw sense, but also can create more complex objects. But that was always because the professor was involved to really be able to know the science and how to kind of put it together like Legos almost. And so you need the science whiz component in Firestorm to really have him cut loose and be able to just kind of create almost anything his mind can imagine that's inanimate. But Professor Stein was revealed at one point to have manipulated Ronnie, and they remind us of that. He says, as he's talking to him, flying around as Firestorm, Ronnie is piloting Firestorm. He's the one in control, and that's how it classically has been. And the professor is just kind of along for the ride, but they're able to mentally be in constant communication with each other. And Ronnie says, "You manipulated me into the accident that made us a superhero and lied to me for years about it." And so he says, "There's no way I'm letting you in the driver's seat ever again." And Firestorm has been through a number of different iterations. I mean, Professor Stein, at one point, I believe, I wasn't reading Firestorm stories at this time, but at one point, he kind of became his own Firestorm, independent of Ronnie, or like became a fire elemental, or they did some weird conceptual thing with him for a while that eventually was rebooted, was kind of reset. And they've really tried to kind of reestablish who and what Firestorm is several times. Eventually, in the last run where they introduced, the idea of two high schoolers, being one a science whiz, one a jock, being in charge of Firestorm. Then they started introducing, I think, other characters into the mix. So there was like multiple Firestorms or multiple people that could become Firestorm. And I was losing interest in the writing at that time. And so I dropped following any idea of what was going on with Firestorm a while back. And when I left it, the character just was a mess conceptually. And so I'm interested in any attempt they would have to re-streamline him, reestablish his origins. And what I seem to be picking up from what they're presenting here is, well, first off, there's the rains that are going on because of the planet Lazarus cause a catastrophe and split Ronnie and the professor, so that they become, both human again. And the professor is horribly wounded or affected, I should say, in some way that's not immediately obvious. Then we cut to a few days later. Ronnie is at a crater with a Dr. Ramirez, who evidently is from Star Labs, and maybe I'm picking up has had some experience with Firestorm, maybe even some experience being Firestorm. So I'm just kind of like trying to pick up clues here and there about what in the world is going on. There's references to the Firestorm Matrix, which I've heard of before. From what I understand, the direction they're taking Firestorm is that Firestorm is more of a concept than an individual character, like a being whose name is Firestorm. Yes, he goes by the name Firestorm when he's active doing superhero things, but it seems at some point they kind of gave the Speed Force treatment to Firestorm, where in The Flash, you've got this force that he's tapping into to do all these super speed things, and all speedsters are tapping into the Speed Force. It seems like there's something kind of along those lines happening with Firestorm, where the Firestorm Matrix is this force, this entity, this thing in existence that various people have become connected to in some way and become a part of making the being of Firestorm. And I don't know if Dr. Ramirez has some past where, he's become Firestorm before. It seems that might be the case. But anyway, bad crap starts going down. And reluctantly, Dr. Ramirez agrees in the moment to join with Ronnie and become Firestorm. Again, Ronnie is in the driver's seat, and this time Dr. Ramirez is, like Stein was before him, in the passenger seat, presumably giving instructions about, how things can be taken apart and rebuilt on an anatomical level. And I'm wondering if part of this transition is about trying to bring some ethnic diversity into the comics. I think that in the New 52 initiative, they were doing that, all kinds of what I would call demographic box checking, to the point where it was hurting the stories. I felt like stories and character were taking a back seat, and to the demographic box checking that they were doing. And I'm wondering if what I'm seeing here could end up being a case of where we could check that demographic box, which I think is fine. That's not like a high priority to me. I don't think people should be looking for and finding their identity in entertainment, But I'm totally fine with that happening. But what was missing before was like someone that's older than Ronnie. I think that's an important perspective and kind of an interesting mashup to have people of different generations. And then also, the science whiz. It's one thing to have a high school student who's a science whiz, but there's something about having like an actual older person who is an experienced, highly educated doctor, of physics or whatever the case may be. And so I'm hoping that Dr. Ramirez will kind of fit that bill. He doesn't look as old as Stein because he doesn't have gray hair. And so I could do with him being older. And maybe that's what they're going to try and do, because when all is said and done, after their superheroics are taken care of and they resplit, Ronnie finds to his horror that Dr. Ramirez has been super aged, which apparently, now is revealed at this point, is what happened to Professor Stein. And so will this be a permanent aging of Dr. Ramirez? Is Dr. Ramirez even going to be part of the Firestorm equation anymore? I don't know. So there's a lot that's up in the air. I think these stories are meant to kind of just give us not a crash course in the characters, but just give us a snapshot of what's going on and what might be coming to try and get us interested. This one does have me interested. Okay, so that's all for Lazarus Planet Legends Reborn. Then we get into The Flash 1 Minute War Special #1, where we get finally a proper introduction to the Fraction, who is the alien race that is coming to Earth, invading it to basically suck up all of its resources and leave it a lifeless husk. And we learn that this is the result of a pattern that's been going on with this alien race, the Fraction, who discovered the Speed Force and how to manipulate it to the point that their civilization began to rapidly advance. Just in hours, what would have taken years for them to accomplish technologically. And their empress was just driven to keep them progressing more and more. And so they outgrew their planet and its resources. They started having to travel all over the universe. And at first they targeted civilizations that were already about to self-destruct. And then in the split seconds before that happened, they just sucked up all their resources or whatever and moved on. But they started going well beyond that eventually and discovering other speedsters that had learned to travel between realities, like, multiverse travel. They started capturing them, taking advantage of their abilities to travel the multiverse. So apparently they're not even from this timeline, or Earth Zero, or Timeline Zero, or whatever in the DC multiverse. But they've arrived now at this point. And of course, we can infer that they see in Earth a great opportunity to capture a bunch of speedsters that will help them more than ever to continue conquering and just satiate their endless hunger for conquest and advancement. So that was kind of nice to get a little bit of background. Then we have a short story. The first short story dealing with the Fraction was called The Past. The next short story is The Present, and it's dealing with, I believe, the Chinese Flash, which is a woman or a girl. I can't remember how old she is. I think she's a teenager, but I could be wrong. But I think she just goes by The Flash. I'm not sure. This short story does not remind me of her name. And I'm not even positive that it's the character I'm thinking of. I'm just going off of the fact that she's fighting a villain named, I don't know, Dark Wu, Evil Wu. I can't remember. But she's in the middle of fighting this guy when the time freeze happens that was going on in the Flash 1 Minute War story that started in the last issue of The Flash. And she's just kind of trying to figure out what's going on, and I guess I want something more from this character. If she's going to be focused on in the Dawn of DC event, I need her to be more than just female and Chinese with the name Flash pasted onto her. I need something interesting about her character. This little bit here just reminds me that she exists and that she's a speedster operating in I think, China. But what I want is for her power set to be a little bit different. It's not that, what you might think, well, what can you do? I mean, if we're already going to say that Wally West or Barry Allen or whoever the Flash is that they're focusing on, if we're going to say they're the fastest man alive, then how can you make another Flash interesting without making them faster? I think you can introduce quirks into their speed powers like they did with Impulse and Wally back in the day when the Speed Force was first introduced. He couldn't control his vibration. He was faster than Impulse, but he couldn't control his vibrating powers, and so he discovered that he could vibrate into objects and supercharge them and cause them to explode. And so that was this interesting little trick that he could do, even though it came out of a limitation. And so something maybe that this Flash could do would be like to be extra good at vibrating her body through objects, or extra good at fine-tuned traveling through the multiverse or something. Maybe she's not as fast as the other Flashes, but she can do these other little gimmicks that they can do fairly well with some limited control over, but she's really good at it or something. So that's really what I would like to see and what I think could differentiate her from other speedsters. But right now, in this little short story, we just see her basically having her own little adventure and doing things that are very common to other speedsters. And so as a result, I'm not really feeling pulled into to her story. But I mean, we'll see. I'm open to seeing what they want to do with her, but again, she has to be more than just a female Chinese Flash operating in China with a different costume. I want a lot more from that to really pull me in. Then we switch to the present part 2, which I'm not sure if I have anything to comment on this. It just shows kind of agents, soldiers of the Fraction on an operation on Earth, and they're getting picked off one by one, almost in horror movie style format, with the reveal at the end being Godspeed, which was I believe a partner of Barry Allen's that came into Speed Force powers at some point during the early New 52 era. And he's kind of a villain, but he sees himself as a righteous person who's out to take vengeance upon those who are murderers and evil and stuff, but he goes too far, so he's that kind of character. So he's been off the radar for a little while, so this just in a nutshell says, hey, he's back on the radar and he's going to be relevant to this story. Okay, that's fine. Then we've got chapter 4 of this issue called The Future, which is about Jay, Wally's son. But he's grown up some, at least, I want to say a teenager, maybe a young adult or something, and he's talking about, in his mind, in his mental monologue, reflecting on the last time he ran into the Fraction, because he's evidently fighting the Fraction in the future. So I don't know exactly what that means. Are they kind of traveling in time in addition to the present day attack on Earth? I don't know what's going on. Feeling a lot of that lately with some of these DC stories. But he just reflects on the fact that when they attacked the first time, he wasn't using super speed powers. His speed powers were being converted into strength. And I remember that being something when he was first introduced pre-Flashpoint, when Wally's kids were said to have Speed Force-based powers. Irie, his daughter, was, more traditionally fast, but Jay had super strength, and to the point where his muscles would really swell up. And they've kept that as they brought Wally's family back. But curiously, they have not done yet what I think is a very obvious maneuver, which is to attribute his powers not to the Speed Force, but to the Strength Force. They've recently introduced these other forces: the Strength Force, the Still Force, the Wisdom, the Sage Force. That's right; they all start with S. The Sage Force, which is kind of like mental powers and stuff. And it seems to me that would have been a great opportunity to realize, we misidentified what was going on. We thought he had Speed Force powers. He was actually tapping into the Strength Force. But strangely, they're saying, no, these are Speed Force powers. And eventually, according to this story about his future self, he will learn to also do super speed stuff and switch back and forth between leveraging the Speed Force for super strength and leveraging it for super speed. So I'm not sure why they're kind of telling us this story about him, and as we see his sister Irie kind of grown up-ish, whatever age they're supposed to be. But I'm not sure that I'm really into it. I hope that we don't get a lot of these guys, these stories about them at this age going forward. This smells like an all too easy springboard for them to somehow age up Wally's kids. I don't know exactly what form that would take. Maybe they would come to the present and replace somehow his younger kids, but I don't want that. I want Wally's kids to stay young, because what happens as soon as you age them up? Well, exactly what happens in this story. He's reunited with a time-traveling character, Gold Beetle, that last interacted with him when Jay was a kid, prepubescent boy. And what happens this time around? They immediately kiss, of course, because that's what you've got to do. We've always got to focus in on romance or sexual tension or flirting and stuff like that. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, we are just so so oversexed? Can we not have characters that have stuff going on in their life that is independent of their sex drives or anything going on with them sexually? I think that our oversexed entertainment culture has led to a whole lot of unhealthy thinking about sexual issues and sexual identity related stuff and all kinds of stuff. So hopefully this is just a little flash in the pan, what if style story, but we're not going to really be focusing on Jay and Irie as these late teen, young adult type characters, because I don't need more of that. But anyway, so that's it for Lazarus Planet, Legends Reborn, and The Flash 1 Minute War. I spent a lot more time talking than I thought I would, but I think that's all that I have to say for now. As always, I would love to get your thoughts and reactions in the comments below. Remember to check out christiangeekcentral.com for tons more content. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.
Do you believe in the supernatural?
Download the Legacy Edition of Spirit Blade, a full past audio drama, for free at spiritblade.com.